I'm Rob.
And I'm Nate.
And welcome back to Rob and Nate Record a Podcast. This is the start of our October movies, and obviously in October you do horror movies. Mm-hmm. So we decided to bring out the big guns right off the gate.
Yeah.
We both kind of had this idea.
Yeah, I think so. Well, I think you were the one who recommended it.
I think I brought it up first.
And the moment I heard it, I'm like, yeah, we should do that.
Yeah. And so we decided that we would open up our 2021 selection of horror movies with the 1973 film The Exorcist.
So this was The Exorcist.
Yes.
We literally have just finished watching it.
Neither one of us have seen this prior to tonight. Neither one of us had great familiarity with it other than its reputation.
I've read some about it. I've seen videos and stuff about it. So I was familiar with the broad outline of what this was, but many of the specifics, there were times where I was quite surprised.
Yeah. And I have listened to podcasts about that, and we're going to get into that as we talk about this. But they did not go into the plot at all.
Oh, okay.
They talked about peripheral things. I guess they talked briefly about the plot, but never any specifics about what happened in the movie. Yeah, I was pretty fresh coming into this. Nate, what are your first impressions? And keep in mind, we have ended the movie, less than 10 minutes ago?
Yeah.
5 minutes ago, even? Mm. What are your first impressions?
It was something, man. We had discussed before watching this, like, I've always been a little bit intimidated by this movie and its reputation. And that's probably a major reason why I haven't actually sat down and watched it. It's been in my queue on things for a long time. One thing that I noticed about this film, and it relates to other work by the director William Friedkin, is how the film takes a lot of time to get going. It's not in a hurry. And that is, to my memory, rather a William Friedkin way of doing things. He made a film shortly after this called Sorcerer, which is a remake of a film from the early 50s called Wages of Fear. And the first 45 or so minutes of his remake is entirely new material. It's background information on the character. So you don't get to the start of the 50s film until like 45 minutes or an hour into his remake. So this movie starts at kind of disjointed. There's probably arguably three different storylines. There's the priest in Iraq at the dig. There's the actress played by Ellen Bursten, who is renting a place in Georgetown while she makes what appears to be like an inspiring teacher or a campus protest movie called Crash Course, the university there. And then you have got Jason Miller as Father Damien Karras, who is a Catholic priest, but he's also a trained psychologist. He's going through some things with his mother. His mother eventually dies. And he is in a crisis of faith. And at first these narratives are all fairly disjointed from each other, and they slowly come together. In fact, the part of the film that you probably think of, even if you haven't seen it, when you think of The Exorcist, is the last half hour of this 2-hour movie.
Yeah. I mean, the first hour and a half really isn't that terrifying, like in terms of a horror movie. Mm-hmm. It's really mostly just that last half hour.
Yeah.
So I asked for first impressions, and you gave me a plot overview.
Yeah, I guess I did. I'm still processing.
Yeah.
It's I wouldn't call it, it's a horror movie, but it's not so much scary as it is disturbing.
Yes, and I guess there's different ways to look at that. Some of it gets into elements of faith, which is interesting. Like, you would not think that a horror or thriller, however you want to classify this, would be a film that delves so heavily on faith.
Well, that is as contemplative as this movie is.
Yeah. A lot of what I'm going to discuss as we talk about this comes from there's a gentleman named Mark Kermode, who is a British film critic. He's also an author, a documentarian. He's done a lot of things. He has actually written a book about this, about the movie The Exorcist, and he's made a documentary about it. And he has multiple times interviewed both William Blatty and William Friedkin, so the writer and the director, about this movie.
It's interesting that Blatty gets a huge credit after the title, The Exorcist, by William Blatty, and then directed by Friedkin.
Yeah.
And it's not usual that you get a writer credit in such bold font so close to the front of the thing.
Yeah, and I mean, Mark Kermode talks a little bit about that in some of the stuff that I've consumed. Evidently, this screenplay was just considered to be spectacular. And so Mark Kermode, this movie came out when he was 10 years old, and he couldn't see it for 6 years. Apparently, he was so obsessed with it. It's based on a novel. He read the novel. He read William Blatty's screenplay and was very familiar with it. Like, I guess he obsessed about it for 6 years before he was able to see it.
Oh, wow.
And has clearly obsessed about it ever since. Yeah.
Blatty wrote A Shot in the Dark.
Yeah.
Pink Panther movie.
Yeah.
He's very versatile.
Well, and I was going to comment on that in relations to William Friedkin. William Friedkin, I was looking at some of his filmography and, kind of looking at what's familiar. This is the same gentleman who directed The French Connection.
Yeah. Probably what he's best known for, other than this.
Yeah, and also Rules of Engagement from 2000. So his career also spanned a pretty broad range of time. He's known for several others, but those were the ones that stood out to me when I was taking a look at it. This film, though, it starts to build the tension from the display of the WB logo. Did you catch that?
You'll have to refresh me.
Well, it opens, after it shows the WB logo, there's that Fairman sound.
Okay.
Which actually was the director taking a glass of wine.
Oh, okay.
And did that in front of a microphone. But the use of that sound effect, it started to build the tension, combined with that musical sound. That...
The music reminded me a little bit of the Halloween theme. It's subtler, and there's less of it. But it feels almost like the Halloween theme was kind of playing off of this.
Yeah, I was having trouble placing it, but now that you mention it, I can see that. I think it's been used in other things as well, but it's effective.
Yeah.
There's a moment where Father Karras is talking to the other priest, and he says that he thinks he's lost his faith. There's apparently an old Anglican joke that says, you don't lose your faith, you just can't remember where you left it. And that seems to become apparent in this movie with Father Karras, which was an element of this movie that I respected.
Yeah, that was really interesting because it's dealing with, this was a fairly transitional period for Catholicism. We're coming about a decade or so out of Vatican II, and there's this, I guess it's long-standing, but it was probably more in vogue at the time, this idea of the priest in faith crisis. And he seems to be having a really legitimate one. He has these concerns about his mother. He kind of blames himself for not taking care of her better and her death. He's also interesting in that he's a boxer. He had been a boxer who became a priest, who became a psychologist.
Yeah.
And there's definitely a fighter in him.
Yeah, and, I didn't really put that together until you mentioned it just now. But that's true, and he fights all the way through the literal end of this movie.
He so does not want this to be real. He has every defense mechanism of the exorcism. What will I have to do to get an exorcism? Well, I'd have to get a time machine, take you back to the 15th century.
Well, and he kind of goes through that with the detective before that.
Yeah.
When the detective's looking for somebody who possibly could have been involved in
I'll tell you who I think it was. The Dominicans. Go bother them.
So I listened to a few different interviews with Mark Kermode, and he talks about, in one of the interviews I listened to, he talks about how there's a vilification of horror movies that sometimes is undeserved.
Okay.
And I'm going to share a quote from Mark Kermode. It's going to take, it's a little long, but he says, people talk endlessly about the damaging effect of horror movies, but too little is heard about the life-affirming power of being scared out of your mind, and in those very rare cases, out of your body. You ask me if I think there is more to this world than the grim realities of aging, disease, and death, of mourning and loss, and I will direct you to this first viewing of The Exorcist. during which my imagination took flight, my soul did somersaults, and the physical world melted away into nothingness around me. I don't think there's a spiritual element to human life. I know it because I experienced it firsthand, and I have horror movies to thank for that blessing.
Well, that quote, I'm sure you have something further to expand on it, but what it made me think of is there's a moment of that in the film. It's when Father Karras and Max von Sydow's character,
Father Lancaster Marin.
They're in the room with Reagan, and the bed starts to levitate off the ground. And you can see it in his eyes. And he gets distracted from the ceremony because I'm really seeing this.
Yeah.
And it becomes real. Like he was at everything in his mind that he could do to come up with a reason why what appeared to be happening isn't really what's happening. And that went out the window. Bad joke. You had more you wanted to say about that quote, right?
No, not about that one per se. I mean, I didn't have quite the same... This film didn't hit me quite as hard as it obviously hit Mark Kermode. But you can see what he's talking about.
Yeah.
This film, especially when it gets into that last half hour, like, it's kinetic, it's gripping, it's... I couldn't take my eyes off the screen.
And you don't know what's gonna happen. I mean, there things happen so quick, and such an important part of the climax happens entirely off screen, which is the death of Father Marin.
Yeah.
Father Karras goes out of the room to do some other stuff, talk to the mother, comes back in, and he's dead on the floor, and Reagan's sitting up kind of giggling. Like, we don't know everything that happened there, but we know enough.
Yeah.
And...
Well, it also could have just been weakness, because Father Marin, we see him taking pills throughout the film.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell if that was nitroglycerin or something. Like, it seems to be something for his heart.
Yeah.
But he, right before this scene, has taken another pill.
Yeah.
And Father Karras was in the room, and the demon is taking on a representation of Father Karras' mother. And so Father Marin kicks Father Karras out of the room, and he goes downstairs and sees the mom, and that's when he gets the resolve to go back and continue to help with this, and he walks in, and Father Marin's dead. So we have, again, like you said, we have no idea what happened. Was it the demon? Was it an exhaustion? Was it too much to do by himself?
Yeah.
I mean, they had
about
mentioned...
that earlier.
Yeah.
He had that previous experience
The Cardinals talk about it.
In Africa.
12 years previous.
And they said it took months to do this particular exorcism.
Yeah. I guess William Blatty, he had issues with how this movie was received.
Okay.
He was concerned that because certain elements had been removed from the film, that he was afraid that the message wasn't going to be there. To William Blatty, the message was clear. It will all be all right in the end. God is in heaven. There are angels. Because if there are demons, there are angels. I guess William Blatty was a very religious man. Mm-hmm. Which you can see that in this movie. You can see that message at the end of this movie. It will be all right. It will be all right in the end. God is in heaven, and there are angels. That is clearly part of the message of this film, or the intended message.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another quote from Mark Kermode. He says, "Horror movies and roller coasters make you feel alive by confronting you with the spectacle of something else."
And this film is several something else. There's a good portion in which it's very clinical. Because when Reagan starts being possessed and starts to behave strangely and do increasingly strange and improbable and near on impossible things, her mother, who goes through all these doctors and psychiatrists and everything in that field, and they can't figure it out. And eventually, in a consultation, one of the doctors just says, I'm throwing this out there, but maybe she should have an exorcism. And then he kind of goes like, not that they're real, but it might be a psychological thing, and that the ceremony could convince her, if she thinks she's possessed, could convince her that she's no longer possessed and exorcise it out. So it's very clinical. Like
through a power of suggestion.
Yeah, power of suggestion. But it's also, there are times where it really does shock, and it really does show you impossible things. And so you kind of follow what so many of the other characters of this film do, which is, this can't be that. This is that.
Yeah.
How did the demon get to her? They kind of
It's
hint
never
at
made
certain
clear.
things, and I think that works. But the one character that finds the stone little statue that Max von Sydow found in Iraq, sitting out there, just outside of the townhouse. How did it get there?
That's never made clear.
Yeah. But obviously there's a connection between the first 10 minutes or so, which is the Iraq portion, and Max von Sydow had that thing, and then he's brought in
Later on.
But how'd it get... Because at first I thought that maybe he had dropped it there?
Yeah, I don't know. There's kind of a disconnect there that's never reconciled, but...
Well, there's also the disconnect when they're talking about the death of the mother, and I forget which character said that she had been left alone for some days before they found her dead.
Well,
but they see him visit her. He visits her in that mental institution.
He visits her in the mental institution and tells her he's going to get her out of there. Mm-hmm. So he gets her out of the mental institution. It's not clear where she's taken from there, and then she dies, and it's several days before she's found.
It must be back home, because she was so adamant about not leaving that. And you can tell that this was probably a nice neighborhood when they moved in decades and decades ago, but it's a crap neighborhood at the point that he goes to visit her.
Yeah. Another quote from William Friedkin. This one's actually from William Friedkin instead of William Blatty. William Friedkin said, "What The Exorcist taught me is people take away from that experience what they brought to it. If you bring the devil, you see the devil. You bring God, and you see God." You know, and then Mark Kermode expanded on that, and he says, "From a theological point of view, the story is immensely encouraging. If you go into it with a Catholic point of view, it's pretty straightforward. The focus of good triumphing over the forces of evil. Charis makes the ultimate sacrifice and is redeemed, as is the girl. Okay. If you don't believe in the theology, the film works on an equal level. Just as a film, it is not her. That's the point. It looks at the mother as she recoils in horror. It takes the doctors as they are, baffled and amazed. It looks at Father Charis as the demon is taunting him. There is more concentration on the character reacting to what's happening to them than what's happening."
Yeah. I mean, this is a thinking man's horror film. It's a very reflective piece. It's very much a piece of 70s cinema.
Yeah.
One thing that obviously wouldn't have been so much a thing at the time because it was contemporary, but looking at these 1970s medical technologies, the MRI machines and the noisy,
that
clunky stuff that they have to be strapped into,
and everything she had to go through to do that
bloodletting thing.
Well, it was contrast imaging. They had to do that to be able to inject a dye, and it was. Yeah, that seemed as torturous as the exorcism on some level, but Going back to Mark Kermode, he talks about how he's frequently been asked how he can watch so many horror movies and go to church.
Oh yeah.
And Mark Kermode's response is he said that he points out that the Passion of the Christ is the most violent movie he's ever seen.
Yeah.
You know, and again, this film focuses more on the reactions of the people to the demon than it does the demon. And I think there's a certain amount to be said for that.
I was pleasantly surprised to see J Cobb. As you'll recall, I would say, "Hey, isn't that J Cobb?"
Oh yeah, as the detective.
As the police detective. This is late in his career. This is 73. I believe he died in 76. But he's an actor. He's a character actor that I just... Every time he pops up in something, "Hey, J Cobb." I'm always happy to see him. And he knows something's up. So the guy who's directing the film that Ellen Bursten is in... Ellen Bursten's a wonderful actress.
Mm-hmm.
That director dies under mysterious circumstances, and so he's trying to figure out what happened, and so he's talking to Ellen Bursten, he's talking to the father, and Charis, and he's kind of hanging out outside of the townhouse when he sees the priest going in, and he's trying to figure out what's happening in there, and he ends up there at the very end of the film. He just happens to stop. He stops by because he's trying to figure out what's happening.
He knocks on the door, and the mother lets him in.
And he ends up in the room, and he's got to be completely befuddled. And he's kind of a bit of a Columbo type charmer. You know, he keeps talking about movies with both the actress and the priest as kind of an in. But yeah, I imagine, and we never get a resolution on him or what kind of report he files.
No, and the movie really kind of wraps up fairly quickly after. So, going back to the plot element, and again, this is a spoiler cast. So after Father Marin dies, Father Burke goes in and finds Reagan on the bed, like you said, kind of giggling and things, and he physically grabs Reagan, puts her on the floor, and is striking her, but as the demon, and telling the demon, "Come into me, like take me, no, out of her." And you see this moment where it's obvious the demon's moving into Father Karras, and then he promptly jumps out the window and in effect just kills himself to end this possession and end the demon, or in this demon's possession of anything. And Reagan is in the corner of the room crying when the mom and the detective come into the room. She's totally back to herself. And after that happens, there's 3 minutes of movie left? It's just the family packing up the house? It's a little longer
than that. But yeah, it's quite the... Yeah, you just kind of skip forward X number of days to when they're packing up and heading out.
And they just load up in the car and
that minor priest character who's a friend of Father Karras stops by.
Father Dyer, played by William O'Malley.
Yeah, and they have that little conversation, and it more or less wraps up. We haven't spoken about Linda Blair yet. What did you think of Linda Blair in this as Reagan?
So I think Linda Blair is actually not on screen that much. She's on the screen a bunch at the beginning, and then again at the end. I think almost all of that stuff in the middle, when she's supposed to be possessed, is stunt doubles or dummies, things of that nature.
And the voice is the actress Mercedes McCambridge.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Who had a kind of famously husky voice, and she was playing that up. Yeah. And then some for that. The makeup really works.
Oh, yeah.
It's disturbing.
Yeah.
The thing with the words written in the body?
Yeah, the help.
I did not see that.
The Reagan writing a message on her own stomach.
You gotta help me. I'm stuck in here.
Yeah. That was interesting. So I've focused, as we've talked about this, I've focused on kind of the faith elements, and that's not where I want all of my focus to be. But that was a big part of how I decided that this was a movie I wanted to see.
All right.
Was listening to an interview with Mark Kermode talking about this and how this movie was intended originally. It was intended to be a faith-promoting movie. Yeah. Yes, it was intended to be a thriller. Yes, it was intended to be a horror movie. But it was intended to the overall message to be faith-promoting. And once I learned that, then I was intrigued by the movie. Then the stereotypes, the things that, we all grew up hearing about this movie, that's when the interest in what was intended of this movie started to override that for me, which is when I suggested that we watch it. And again, as you said, as soon as I suggested it, you were all over it, and we both agreed. And this was, 6+ months ago that we talked about that? I mean, it's been a while that we've been planning this. And so I just wanted to make sure that we highlighted those in this. Because again, one of these... This movie is one of those things where fear of the thing only perpetuates the fear.
Yeah.
Not that I'm trying to downplay this movie or the horror elements of it, but now that I've seen it, does this live up to the reputation that it had?
Probably not 100%. Close, but not quite as overwhelming as I thought it would be.
Well, to me, it holds up in a different way. The production of this movie was very well done. It's a good-looking movie. Yeah. And it's a thorough movie.
Smart screenplay.
The only critique is like you've talked about, how long it takes to get going. Things of that nature. Yeah. One of the things we should talk about is this film is well regarded for a number of reasons. I think I told you going into this, this was nominated for 10 Oscars and won 2. Wow. Would you like to guess on what it won and what it was nominated for?
I mean, it's the score?
It won for Best Sound.
Best Sound, all right.
I will look and see if it was nominated for the score.
Cinematography nomination, I would have guessed that.
It was not nominated for the score. So its 2 wins were for Best Writing, Screenplay based on material from another medium,
Okay.
or what we now know as adapted screenplay. Yeah. And then it also won for Best Sound. It was a nominee for Best Picture, Best Actress in a Leading Role, Best Actor in a Supporting Role, Best Actress in a Supporting Role, Best Director, Best Cinematography, Best Art Direction, Decoration, and Best Film Editing.
It really scores in all those areas. I mean, there's no part of this film that I would say was weak.
You might know this better than I, or might know this off the top of your head better than I would. Do you have any recall of how many films have been nominated for that many Oscars?
I don't think a lot.
Yeah. I mean, 10 Oscars, that's a lot. So, I mean, this film was well regarded.
Yeah, critically, it's an 83% on Rotten Tomatoes.
This has an aggregate score on IMDb of 8 stars even.
Yeah. It was a huge deal when it came out. I mean, this was a lines around the block kind of film. It was made for a budget of $12 million, making $441.3 million at the box office. This was a once-in-a-career success for the people involved.
Well, and that's 1973 money.
1973 money, yeah.
It had an opening weekend of $8.1 million in the U.S. That's a lot of money. I guess the scene where Reagan projectile vomits on Father Karras, it only required one take. You can see why.
Yeah.
It was intended to hit the actor in the chest, but the plastic tubing misfired, and that's when it hit him in the face. And his reaction of shock and disgust while wiping away the vomit was genuine. I guess the actor, Jason Miller, he admitted later on he was quite upset about that mistake.
I'll bet he was.
So.
Yeah. He's good. He's very understated. Never became a big star, but he's quite good in this.
I guess there was so many death threats against Linda Blair from religious zealots who believed that the film glorified Satan that Warner Brothers had to hire bodyguards to protect her for 6 months after the film's release.
They have not seen this film if they think this film glorifies Satan.
No.
This film has taken a very anti-Satan position.
Yeah, absolutely it does. When adjusted for inflation, this is apparently Warner Brothers' highest-grossing film of all time.
Wow.
The bedroom set had to be refrigerated to capture the authentic icy breath of actors in the exercising scenes. Linda Blair, who was only in a flimsy nightgown, says to this day she cannot stand to being cold.
Oh, yeah.
Apparently, at one point, Jack Nicholson was being considered for the part of Father Karras.
Yeah,
I don't know how well that would have gone over.
A lesser-known actor helps this part.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's all the trivia I'm going to look at on this one. What other thoughts do you have about this movie?
This is one I'll be thinking about for a while and processing. I'm sure this is one that would warrant a rewatch. There's good possibility that I will watch at least one of the sequels probably in the next several weeks.
Yeah.
I was looking at 2. It has a tremendous cast, but it has like a 15% Rotten Tomato. But I hear 3, which has George C. Scott in it, is supposed to be excellent.
Are any of those written, like who writes and directs those, do you know? Do they have connections to the original?
I don't think there's much connection, at least in 2, but I think that 3 may have had the same screenwriter. I'd have to look into it.
Yeah, I'm impressed by this film at the end. Again, the beginning is a little bit slow developing. There's some things that aren't fully connected. But the last half hour of this movie, it overrides a lot of this. Yeah,
and I didn't mind the slower pace. I just wasn't necessarily expecting things to seem so all over the place before they coalesce. But it's very much a film of its time. It kind of reminded me when I saw Saturday Night Fever, because I had this image in my mind of what Saturday Night Fever is, the goofy disco movie. And then it was a different movie than I expected. And this was similar. This isn't the, vomit everywhere, horror. It's a subtler film that earns that ending. It builds up to it. And it does cap it. If it had been that the entire time, it would have been just too much. It would have been gross and I wouldn't have liked it. It's earned horror.
Yeah. Absolutely. How would you rate this film?
It's a 4-star movie. I'm going to give it 9 out of 10.
I think we're actually the same on this one. Yeah, I'm going 4 because I don't want to give it the 3.5. I debated between an 8 and a 9, but I can't really critique a lot, and so I'm going up to that 9. It's not quite a 10-star movie, but yeah, it says definitely warrants a 9.
Yeah. Worth seeing if you're up to it. It's very much a film literacy movie.
If you're someone who's been put off just because of its reputation and some of those things that I'm sure you heard at church, consider watching this film. Learn about it, take it from perspective, learn how the director and writer intended it to be taken, and then go watch the film and enjoy it. Yeah, as a child growing up and hearing about this film at church, I expected that I would come out of this like traumatized, and I'm not even slightly. It's again like I read that one quote, kind of what you take into it is what you take out of it, and if you go into it expecting to be traumatized, you're probably going to be traumatized. But if you don't, then there you go. Okay, I'm Rob.
I'm Nate.
And this is Rob and Nate Record a Podcast.
You heard about this film at church?
Well, like in church circles, like people would talk about how you should never see The Exorcist because, same type of thing. It glorifies Satan.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. You never heard that?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I vaguely remember hearing something about not seeing Monty Python and the Search for the Holy Grail.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
People have their reasons.
Unpopular opinions. Again, I'm not letting go of that alternate theory that Carl's the one that killed.
Carl's the one, yeah.
Burke Denning.
Could be.
Yeah.
Burke was kind of an interesting. Wasn't Ellen Bursten supposed to be marrying Burke? Like they were like
they were dating.
They were dating.
Well, because remember, Reagan says you can bring Burke to my birthday party, and
what
you're going to marry him, right?
See in him?
Well, after that party, you wonder, because he follows Carl around, calling him a Nazi.
Yeah. My first thought is because he's presumably a successful director, and he's not a good-looking dude.
No.
And so you'll see this kind of thing happen with the pretty actress and the not particularly attractive director. Must have been one of those kind of things. Maybe as a personality.
Yeah.
I was going to say that this is not the scariest film that Linda Blair starred in.
Okay.
She was also, of course, in The Exorcist 2. But by far the scariest title in Linda Blair's filmography is the 1979 film Roller Boogie.
Oh, yeah? I'm not familiar with that one.
That's a joke, see.
I'm missing it.
It's Roller Boogie. It's a disco roller skating movie.
And that's scary?
And that would be scary.
Okay.
That's the joke.
Sorry, I made your joke. Flat as Father Karras. Sorry. Too soon?
I didn't trust those stairs the moment I saw them. I'm like, something's going to happen on those stairs.
Well, so there's that moment where J Cobb, who's, I thought he was detective, but it says Lieutenant William Kinderman, he comes to the window and looks down at Father Karras at the bottom of the stairs. I wonder if that's not supposed to be pretty much how Burke was found.
Yeah.
It's not made clear. But
it's not clear because you see him leave the party.
Well, because he's found at the bottom of the stairs, too.
But later, J Cobb is convinced that he fell out of the window.
Well, no, that he said that he had to have been killed and thrown out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that threw me a little bit because he goes in when talking to the mother like this is established stuff, and like I don't recall seeing anything about him going up there. I saw him leave the party, going out the front door.
Yeah.
So how'd he get up there? So this is one of those number of things, and maybe when you were talking about how the writer was concerned certain things wouldn't translate, maybe part of those things are. Some of these little inconsistencies I think were intentional, but some might be editing mistakes.
Well, yeah, exactly, because he said that he was afraid it was going to get misinterpreted because of the things that were left out.
My understanding is there is an expanded cut that has like another 10, 12 minutes.
I wouldn't be surprised that if there is, but yeah. I'm glad we watched this.
I'm glad we watched it.
The hype was like totally overrated.
I was worried I'd be kind of scared and kind of in a weird like place emotionally at the end of the film.
I was captivated, but none of those things occurred.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna be okay.
I think
I'm gonna sleep okay too.
You don't need your kitty to come in and cuddle with you. Well, it's not even your kitty, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Your adopted kitty to come?
My occasional visitor.
Adopted's also too strong a word. Yeah. Occasional adoptee kitty. So, have you fed it yet?
Oh, no, I'm not going to feed that thing.
Yeah.
It's like it can come by and I will pet it, and it seems content with that. But I'm not going to do anything to make it think that it gets stay.
Yeah.
The power of podcasts compel you. The power of podcasts compel you.
What did you make of that ritual and rite? The actual exorcism?
I remember reading a thing in, I think it might have been the New York Times or something several years ago, and it was about an exorcism conference. And there was a freaking exorcism conference, and they had exorcists from all over, and the article had mentioned that Pope Francis had a preferred exorcist, and that it was a little bit controversial because he's a Lutheran. There were Lutheran...
Wait, seriously?
There's at least one Lutheran exorcist, and Pope Francis knows him.
That's like baffling me, just that concept.
Well, this movie makes it seem like this was hardly a thing, and it was kind of the secret shame of the church, and they'd do it on rare occasion, but they didn't like to talk about it. I wonder if this film mainstreamed it.
I don't know.
Because from the conversation of the priests and stuff in this film, the idea of an exorcism conference would seem inconceivable.
Yeah. I mean, so the conversation about exorcisms are always like, you know, apocryphal type thing, right? My understanding at one point was that they basically have like one or two exorcism specialists per continent. So like there's one in North America, one in South America, possibly two in South America. My understanding is there's like two in Africa.
Yeah.
There's like one for Europe, you know, things like that. One or two for Asia, that type of a thing. So, but that beyond that, there's just not enough need for it.
It would be kind of interesting to, like, I wonder how many exorcisms are performed in the world a year.
Well, so it's also changed because there was people that died under the auspices of an exorcism years, I mean, we're talking like 50 plus years ago. Well, probably closer to 70 plus years ago at this point. So the church's demonstration of exorcism has changed. So, you know, now they take care to pad things and restrain them, like you see here, to avoid those types of things. They monitor certain physical care, you know, physical things to make sure that they're not...
But it's a thing that happens. It's not like a witch trial. They don't do witch trials anymore.
No, but you can see how exorcisms, like, especially in like the 1700s, like any medical malady that couldn't be relieved, and you know, like, oh, it's possessed, we need to conduct an exorcism, and they were just blown out of proportion, and yeah, you can see how some of that happened. Anyways, that took a weird twist at the end.
Yeah,
we'll see if it makes the edit, but yeah. How are you feeling?
I'm doing good.
Yeah?
Indeed.
You about ready?
You said that you were testing new equalizer settings? Are they Denzel Washington or Edward Woodward?
Denzel Washington.
Queen Latifah, too, is going to be a thing soon.
Queen Latifah is going to do equalizer?
Equalizer on TV.
Wow. Seems like our overall sound level is lower on these settings. So I'll adjust that slightly.
I wouldn't be surprised if we have to take pauses in this while we gather our thoughts. So be prepared for that.
And let's signal our pauses, though, so that we...
Okay.
Yeah. That way one of us isn't trying to fill the void. I might delete this out of the edit. You know what I think it was?
What?
It was Carl. The butler guy.
Oh, Carl?
Because Burke was calling him a Nazi at the party.
Oh, yeah, true. That's a theory.
Anyway, so that was a little bit off topic, and especially for the rest of it.
At that moment...
Sorry. Did you do that on purpose?
No, it just came out.
Editing break.